Well, we are still in Florida in the local studios. Delighted to be here. And we are bringing back Dr. Kelly Victory in the house tonight. You all are very excited to hear from her. It's been a couple of weeks, and she's been sharpening her knives. So we'll hear what she has to say. And along with that, there is a... Are you an undocumented immigrant?
I'm documented and local.
We have one that may not, he's going to be visiting Canada next week, may not make it home to stateside.
Might be claiming asylum soon.
The one and only Viva Fry is back with us as well. It is vivabarneslaw.locals.com where you can find them. You get his show and just Google Viva Fry. I'll tell you more of the particulars and where you can find him on Twitter and whatnot. So we got a lot to talk about today. I was actually laughing at the promo for the today's show. I don't write these promos. I find out about them. And today I thought was hit the mark pretty soundly. So we'll get to all of that and more after this. Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say. Well, Mother's Day is upon us, and Genucel's Mother's Day sale has arrived as well. Perfect timing because Susan and I have upgraded our bundles with even more of our favorite skincare products now for over 50% off. We've been working with Genucel for almost 2 years, and because Genucel makes really the best skincare products in the world, you'll see. In fact, you can see how my skin corrected and repaired in this moment from the show live on our stream. And we know it's important to you. Genucel products use naturally effective proprietary ingredients that are non-GMO, plant-based formulas made in the USA. Just some of the reasons Genucel has 400% the customer loyalty of other skincare brands.
I know I'm a snob about the products I use on my face. Everybody knows it. Every time I go to the dermatologist's office, they're just rows and rows of different creams. And then when I get to the counter, they're overpriced. All kinds of products that you can all find at Genucel.com.
For now until Mother's Day, order Susan's Essentials package to get her favorite Ultra Retinol and Vitamin C serum, as well as other skincare must-haves. Order right now at Genucel.com/Drew and get a free luxury spa box that includes their incredible neck treatment, a free gift plus free shipping. That is Genucel.com/Drew, GENUCEL.com/DREW. So, as I said, Dr. Kelly Victory is in here with us. Susan's yelling something at us for some reason. I don't know why.
I don't think Jeff's going to be here today. It's too early for him.
Okay. Do we need to know that? So be that as it may, we are here, Dr. Kelly Victory in the house. As I said, you know her as board certified ER doctor, a specialist with 30 years of clinical experience. CMO of whole health management, Duke University MD, and then what's your public health training? Harvard Public Health training.
Yeah, I don't have an MPH, but I did postgraduate work.
And obviously, Kelly's been supporting us for quite some time. We have been here in Florida working with the wellness company, seeing some of our friends and seeing where the fulfillment centers are for some of these pharmaceuticals. It's been very interesting, right?
It's been incredible. I mean, it's really interesting to pull the whole group together, to have the entire chief medical board together.
Well, what was interesting about that to me is we happened to be at this fulfillment center for our emergency kits. And we couldn't stop talking about all the stuff we've been sharing together for all these years. We still feel like we have an urgency about it.
Right. Well, I'm flying in rarefied air, sitting not only with you, but with Dr. Peter McCullough, Harvey Risch, Jim Thorpe. I mean, we are, the people who were really on the front lines when this whole debacle started. And so it was.
And you've been spot on, and we're going to talk about Chris Cuomo and some of his admissions now, what he's admitting. But speaking of rarefied air, Viva Fry in the house. Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Thank you for getting me out of the house.
Your wife's book, because I want to make sure I don't forget to promote this.
And I nearly forgot to take it out of the car. She made.
Oh, that would be.
She would have killed you.
Absolutely.
So give me a one shot, and there we are. How we feel. It's essentially a kid's book about neuroscience. I thought this was the other book she's also giving me.
There's the other one, which is called, the volume one is called The Brain.
I think it's called The Brain.
And then this one's How You Feel. What I love is there's a section in there that you can cut out a brain, put it together, and put it over your head. And
I'm
so,
glad that that's what you got out of this.
in the next version, they'll make it out of tin foil so that this is your joke. I'm stealing it, but I gotta recommend this to my wife. Have 2 tin foil pages in the middle.
No, just have a thing where you cut around the what do they call that? Like you're cutting a
perforated paper.
No,
paper dolls.
No, but you put the foil on top of the
stencil.
And then cut around it. That'll work. Stencil works. It's not what I was thinking of, but it'll work. But anyway, I like the fact that she's getting at not just how the sensory system works, but how are we feeling felt? Like how do we, it turns out, we're getting a little early stuff here that I didn't expect to get into, but it turns out our the anterior cingulate has got a sort of a map and a homunculus, just like the motor and the sensory cortex has a homunculus. We have a feeling homunculus in the center of our brain that is monitoring our organs and how our body sort of information that's not explicit. You know what I'm talking about?
No, you lost me at homunculus, but
homunculus is like a little tiny man, a little tiny thing, and it goes from vague to more clear as you move from anterior to posterior or posterior to anterior. And it's not in the anterior cingulate; it's in the insular cortex. The insular cortex is actually this sort of zone of taking information from the autonomic nervous system, much the way the nerves of feeling and motor go to the motor and feeling cortex. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, that's how we communicate with each other in ways that are nonverbal. We have these feeling areas.
If I may dumb it down a little bit, what I found interesting, and my wife was trying to explain it to me, is how pain affects mood and how mood affects pain.
She talks about that.
And when we did that Spartan race and I smashed my leg in the first, I bashed it on the ground, where any day of the week that would have been enough to I would have sat there and put ice on it. But in the moment, you don't feel the pain.
That's right, because you're flooding with endorphins. But she also talked about the amygdala. And there's a famous video of Viva with his amygdala firing off like a maniac because he caught a fish.
Oh, yes.
Well, the other thing is the way that you interpret your emotion, the way you interpret the situation is based very much on the context. So if your heart rate goes up and you are in the face of a, saber-toothed tiger, you interpret it as fear. If your heart rate went up and you were watching pornography, you interpret that same physiologic change as sexual arousal. So you interpret the same physiologic change, heart rate, blood pressure, sweating, totally differently, pain, totally differently, depending on the context.
Famous experiment of putting a couple on a roller coaster. When they both were aroused, they were more likely to feel like that was an attraction.
Right.
Well, I was going to make a joke about whether or not about having an erection when seeing a saber-toothed tiger, but leave that one for another day.
If you're into Viva, it's all you, my friend. Where's your Twitter?
The Viva Fry, because there's a Russian, FRA. There's a Viva Fry account. It hasn't been used in years, and it's from some Russian dude. And I DM'd him and asked him if I could have it, but the Viva Fry.
How much did he ask?
Never got back to me. Wow. I wanted to tag Elon and see if there's a dead account that hasn't been used in years.
What did she ask him?
Can you get that?
I might try it this afternoon.
And then Kelly, what I wanted to really actually start with today was something we finished the show with yesterday, as we were talking about how mysterious it was to me and Dr. McCullough that so many people, we were trying to understand what it is about what happened during COVID and during some of the more extraordinary mass formation movements throughout the last 300 years. And we pointed at, somebody said, Peter or somebody said, who else was in here with me? I've already forgotten who was. We had a third guest.
Steph.
No, then we had another third guest. But anyway, Dave.
Thank you.
Dave Rubin. My brain today is not working that great. So Dave Rubin was in here. He said, well, people like control. It seems like that's all about wanting control. And I was like, well, I don't understand that. Why would people want control? I don't want to tell people how to live. I don't want to, it's not interesting to me at all. But then you stand up at the end of the show,
right?
And as a psychologist, a former psychologist, you announced all of a sudden.
Well, what I was saying is, normal people, ethical people, moral people are not interested in controlling others unrelentlessly. But the libido dominandi is the concept. It's Latin for fundamentally man's lust for control, which is a primordial feeling, a primordial driver. In the same way,
by primordial, do you mean primitive, like people that are still primitive personalities?
A core
in the Freudian sense.
I don't feel it. Do I still have it?
Well, the reason you don't, the libido dominandi, and it comes from St. Augustine's book, City of God. He had the concept of two separate universe, a city of God, which was guided by humility and love of God, versus a city of man, which is guided by self-centeredness and love of self and, lack of humility, selfishness. Most people, just like normal people as they age and how they pay attention to social constructs, to moral constructs, ethical constructs, they are able to control those primordial or innate urges. We don't go out and just grab something from somebody else's plate when we're eating because we have social graces. But some people don't control that. Some people will not control those urges. And unfortunately, you see it happen when people are given any amount of authority. Their default is generally to try to expand on that. Look at your average TSA agent. These are people who are poorly trained, poorly educated. You give them a badge, and all of a sudden, they want to mess you through because they can. The people at the DMV, the people that, these are the petty tyrants who make our lives miserable.
Well, I always wondered how Germans could become prison guards, right, during the Second World War. And I had an experience during COVID. I went to the hospital where I've been attending for 40 years. And of course, the door was locked. It was during COVID. It was a darker hour. It was time to distribute the vaccine. I went in to get the vaccine. I'm attending there, went to get the vaccine. I'm holding my ID up, and this guy at the door gives me a steely look. He's in a security, young guy, like 25-year-old. Never seen him there before, clearly a new hire. And finally, he lets me in the door, and I go, I have an appointment to get the vaccine. I was seeking the vaccine at that point. I didn't get it because of this guy and what ensued. He starts screaming at me, "Where are your papers?" Screaming, "Where are your papers?" And I thought, this is like a World War II border crossing scene. And I couldn't believe the thought bubble in my head was like, does this feel good to you to talk to a senior physician this way?
And the answer is,
probably does.
Yes, it does.
Which is so confusing to me.
The answer is yes, because you're taking people who otherwise, they have an insatiable lust for control. That is what the libido dominandi is. And the idea is that we all have it. Some of us, most of us, are better at controlling it in the same way that you control your urge to do.
I must sublimate it because I have the opposite. I have the opposite.
No,
I want to leave you alone.
Tucker was just on with Joe Rogan, I think, and he talked about. I more not prefer his angle, but I more relate to it that people who are in control of their lives and people who are confident, either they don't succumb to that innate desire or they don't have it in the first place. Whereas it's the people like he gave the Liz Cheneys and these people whose personal lives are in disarray and disorder feel the need to control the lives of others. And unfortunately, I guess there might be a lot of people who, for reasons beyond their control, are not in control of their lives, but succumb to that desire to impose the control that they lack in themselves on others.
Correct. And they always commonly, like in the case of Bill Gates or Klaus Schwab or George Soros, they couch it in the terms of it's a paternalistic thing. I'm doing this because I know better than you what's good for you. I know better. They will couch it in attractive, try to package it in attractive sort of, palatable terms.
So crazy.
But it is fundamentally their insatiable lust for control.
I said at the beginning of this pandemic, maybe put it in quotes at this point, I could never understand how society's devolved into Nazi Germany or Soviet. But now I will never have that doubt again.
I absolutely agree.
I got a call from not a TSA agent, but a ArriveCan app agent. When we were shopping, ArriveCan was the app. Yeah, this app that the government derived. Yeah, it was to track people coming in and out, make sure they complied with COVID requirements. It was supposed to cost $80,000. It cost, I think, $60 million. I'm not exaggerating, by the way. It's 54 to 60 million. Bottom line, whenever you cross the border, you fill in put in your passport, who you're with, when you come back, your vaccination status. And I had a 12-year-old at the time who was not vaccinated, is not. But they said because she's not vaccinated, you have to put her in quarantine for 2 weeks. So I get a call on my phone and my heart starts beating. This would be the saber-tooth moment where I'm enraged, but I'm recording and I'm not. First of all, I don't succumb to that, but enraged. And the woman's telling me, your daughter's supposed to be in quarantine for 14 days. And I was like, in virtue of what? Sir, and I got this sir like 15 times. Then you realize when neighbors rat out other neighbors because they're too close to each other outdoors, when these agents think they get to lock up a kid for 2 weeks, it's not the same distance as Nazi Germany, but it sure as hell is the same direction.
And the problem is the more you indulge it, the more it is indulged by society or by legislation, the more empowered they are. It doesn't, you cannot satisfy the beast. You cannot satisfy the libido dominandi. It just grows.
This is what we were talking about a little bit with Dave Rubin yesterday, was it feels like the bureaucracy is the enemy right now. That bureaucracy was was something developed by monarchical states, these centralized administrations, which found its apex in Louis XVI. It was dismantled in the French Revolution. And in the French Revolution, there were people that wanted a sort of centralized, sort of Russia-like totalitarian state run by a centralized administrative state. And there were royalists, and there were a couple other sections there too. But the point is, this centralized hierarchy has never really been, it's been other than in a feudal system. And here we are adopting what the monarchs, Louis XVI, took to an excess. We're thinking that's a good idea. But what Dave Rubin was bringing up yesterday was that it seems to be really running amok with middle level people, that the people in authority are sort of confused by it and sort of don't understand or really weren't aware necessarily. For instance, when it comes to suppressing speech on Twitter, it was all middle level people doing that work.
Because the elites take advantage of the libido dominandi by going to these middle management. They know they say, you have the authority, you flight attendant, to kick that passenger off the plane if he won't put his mask over his nose.
Sounds like something that happened to you.
You have the
Do we have a problem here, Mr. Dr. Victory?
You have the authority, DMV, clerk, to not, renew this patient.
To kick somebody out.
Somebody out of the line. You have the authority. There's these petty tyrants. These are the people, but the people above them who are pulling the strings of the puppets know this about these people, and they use them as their minions. It's the brown shirts. It's how you develop the brown shirts.
Is there a way to helpfully take these same people who are using really what is envy ultimately as their driving mechanism and move them have empathy for them and move them towards something healthy?
Not in this lifetime. Not without. At least I'm not aware of it. I truly think it's gotten on steroids. As people become more disenfranchised and less in control of their own lives, they latch on more and more to this.
That makes them want to have. But that makes them want also to have the, what you call it, the swaddling? They want to have a swaddling state at the same time.
Exactly. Well, I was making the statement, and I have many times during this disaster of the pandemic, that unfortunately a relatively large percentage of the population, I would say probably 20%, have taken the control mechanisms, the masking, the social distancing, the lockdowns, and it's like a baby with swaddling. You wrap it up tightly, it loses control of its own arms and legs, loses all autonomy, but somehow feels more secure in its little chrysalis, in its cocoon. And for some of the population, they really feel that mask. It makes them feel safer.
It's the opposite of Eva Fry.
It's what replaces, I'm not a religious person, but I believe firmly that this is what replaces the tendencies, the human innate tendency that we have towards religion. If you don't have a good religion, you're going to fill it with a bad religion. And they've changed, the kippas and the garbs for the face masks. And
not only that, but Matthias Desmet in his mass formation theory holds that because of the decrease in the utility and the power of religion, narcissism, envy, grievance has been an opportunity to really fill in the gaps, and then to substitute with the false gods. It's really what the Bible warned people about.
And that ties back, that was sort of the contention in St. Augustine's City of God, was that without God, you will end up in the city of man. And the city of man is all about self-indulgence and self-importance, lack of humility.
He wrote about it because he'd seen this happen before.
Correct, yeah.
Ancient societies did this once in a while.
I was listening to a podcast with the individual that I'm interviewing tonight, Jeremy Carlin, talking about the Bible is the story of humanity. Yeah. And what we see happen over and over again. And I'm not going to become religious necessarily, but you read the Bible and you understand in various iterations, this occurs over and over again, which is why reading the Bible is a way to detect it. And why I think some religious people who've read the Bible were able to detect this earlier than, say, me, who has not ever read the Bible or certainly doesn't know the lessons in the Bible.
Detect earlier what?
The tendency of humankind to devolve into what we saw over the last 4 years.
We couldn't understand it. We were like,
we couldn't see it quite. The people who escaped Russia could see the communist tendencies coming sooner than others. And I think people who are familiar with the stories of the Bible identified the mark of the beast metaphorically and saw it earlier than the secular people.
Spoiler alert, we're in the book of Revelations.
Yeah. How did that end, the Bible?
I hate to break it to you, but I know how this one ends. We are devolving is exactly the word. We are circling the drain in ever tighter circles.
Sidebar about St. Augustine. He wrote a book called Confessions, which was the first autobiography which I read.
I know it does.
And we're here talking in the background. What's going on there? You okay?
My mic has a mind of its own.
Your microphone.
I'll tighten this up.
Okay.
So, but let me go on in the meantime, is that that book, Confessions, is sort of the first big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Right. He was a sex addict, and his mom was an alcoholic, Monica, alcoholic. And he talks about it in his confessions. And that's what he's confessing, is this condition he had and his mom had. We know it as alcoholism and addiction today. And he then had a spiritual moment, a moment of clarity, as we call it in recovery. And then you get St. Augustine. It was so interesting to me when I read it. I was like, oh my God, this is the first.
If there's an audible version of this, I might be listening to it on the way back home.
It's quite long. It's not a short book, but it is an autobiography ever. The next one was by Rousseau, and it was also called Confessions, and it is a shit show by comparison.
But history is cyclical. We will come back around. They wrote about this, and they will write about it again long after we are gone, because we will do this again. Yeah. Unfortunately, history does repeat itself.
Until we have the collision with an asteroid or the aliens, whatever comes.
Oh, no.
Okay. We'll be long into the AI realm of perpetual existence by that point.
So. Okay.
No, actually, one thing before I forget is, having understood how the society's devolved into like Nazi Germany-esque, I noticed it's two things: the libido dominandi. Also, the function of just getting people addicted to the state, where those who would otherwise defy it no longer have the autonomy to defy the state. Yes, why are you doing this? Because it's my job. If I don't do it, I'm going to not get paid.
Yeah, I think that's what fascism had in mind.
Yeah, but it's like you get everyone fully dependent on the state. Yeah. They don't have the freedom to say no. And you can sort of understand it, but they're looking sad while they ask you for your papers.
No, absolutely. If you control, we've known for a long time, if you control people's healthcare, their housing, their food, their transportation, their education, you own them. You are fundamentally a slave.
As Peter was pointing out today, Peter McCullough, we were hanging out with today, and that as I've said many times, in the French Revolution, Robespierre's committee, they had a name for the committee, but they had a name for but what they called it. It wasn't called a committee, but in any event, the group of people that Robespierre headed in order to carry out the terror where all the people were beheaded was called the Committee for Public Safety.
Doesn't, am I not mistaken, Soviet literally means committee, or the word committee translates to Soviet?
Yeah, essentially a Soviet committee. Little committees and they were local Soviets all over the place.
So as I said, they always couch it, they always package it in terms that sound very palatable and very paternalistic and very, the World Health Organization has nothing to do with health. They don't give a crap.
It does have to do with the world.
Right. The world, yes, but health, no. It has nothing to do with that. So they put these terms on it that make it sound like it's very lofty.
We're going to have to call it World Health Organization, so-called, and just switch it to World Organization.
Right. The World Control Organization. Just call it what it is.
Right. Exactly.
We're going to Canada tomorrow to protest, organize against some of the recent bills in Canada, one of which, a proposed bill, is called the Online Harms Act.
This is amazing.
It's outrageous. It's to prevent online harms by risking life imprisonment if you promote or advocate for genocide.
Is that what that is? I heard there's another law that maybe it's the same one, that if you had ever posted anything.
That's section, I want to say proposed section 13.
If you'd ever posted anything that could be considered hate, you're going to prison.
Well, no, it's a little more nuanced than that. Elon Musk, if you're listening now, he asked the question, I clarified. If you have access to a post that could be deemed to be hate, and you don't block it or delete it, and it gets republished in the future after the passage of this law, that would count as republication under the law, and therefore you could be liable for online. It's so freaking wild.
And does it have to, here it is, Elon Musk joins controversy over new Canadian bill. Does it have to be something you posted, or could it be just something that showed up on your thread?
No, it would,
that would be bad.
It would be really for example, call it the Jordan Peterson amendment to this law, where they say, if you put up a tweet that said, the actress who Ellen Page, and her doctors that performed a double mastectomy, they're criminals. If he left that up and it gets republished after this law comes into passage.
Saying it now.
First of all, I'll retweet it and test the law if I have to, because everyone's entitled to.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's not coming home.
Or I'm not coming back.
No, that's what I mean. Please don't go.
Because you're going to Canada tomorrow.
I'm going tomorrow. We're gonna have an event all day Friday. Don Jr., Kimberly Guilfoyle, Ezra Levant, Sheila Gunn Reid, David Menzies.
He's going to jail.
It's apparently they're setting up counter protest sites, and there's going to be police there. It's going to. I might
Congratulations.
I might interview some of the counter protesters if I can be sure that they're unarmed and not within striking distance. But no, it's like they call this law the Online Harms Act, and then they call the inflation bill the anti-inflation bill, but it has like I don't know what else it has in it. The border bill has aid to Ukraine. It's they give them cute names to slip through the true purpose of the law.
Well, that's what we live that way here in the United States. Obamacare had almost nothing to do with healthcare and everything to do with everything else that they wanted to jam through. Okay, it's 2,900 pages, and I think the word diabetes appears once. Okay, I mean it's the biggest driver of healthcare costs. Yet it's not even in. It has not. Yeah, Is that the one pork. That Nancy Pelosi famously said we got to pass it to see what's in it? What's in it? Absolutely. That's how we roll here.
Okay, I'm going home. I had enough.
Black pill of the day here.
Two together.
Sorry.
Two together rough. So, all right. Anything on the Restream, Susan, before I go to break?
I'm going to shout it out. I love Dr. Victory.
I love Dr. Victory is coming through on the Restream. Anything on the Rumble Rants? Anything?
They're all agreeing with you. They love the conversation.
Okay.
It says, somebody said, don't hire the unvaccinated. Make them use up their savings and spend more money and tank the economy.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure how. I got to unpack that one.
Don't hire the unvaccinated so they can spend their money and tank the economy. Whatever it is.
Make money and tank the economy.
Oh, I see. They want to. I think they just want to precipitate a crisis. So we can get over all this stuff.
Okay.
But I don't think that's coming either.
Oh, we're going to talk about
Cuomo.
We're going Cuomo. Trust me.
We got a lot of Chris Cuomo coming.
To say about Cuomo.
Yeah, and by the way, I think we're probably going to have kind of mixed opinions about, in terms of feelings about what he did.
Okay.
I'm super pleased with it. I'm super pleased. I don't expect people to go all the way to where they need to go first time at bat.
Okay.
So we'll see.
I'll give you that. We'll unpack that.
All right. We'll talk about that and more with Viva Fry and Dr. Kelly Victory after this. Let's talk about aging, because everyone wants to know how to slow it down. For almost a decade, I've been taking a healthy aging supplement called True Niagen. This supplement boosts NAD. That's something that cells can't live without. It's done with a patented form of nicotinamide riboside called NR, or Niagen. It's more efficient and more scientifically reviewed than NMN or other NAD boosters. True Niagen is truly the best way to boost NAD levels, and it's made by Chromadex. They are the gold standard in the NAD space. Dr. Charles Brenner, the scientist who discovered the NAD boosting potential of NR, explains.
And the center of the metabolism that allows the conversion of food into energy is NAD coenzymes. And NAD gets disturbed in the aging process. And as we're exposed to conditions of metabolic stress, Niagen, which is the form of NR that was developed by Chromadex, is the best and the only fully legal form of NR. And this is really the gold standard for NAD boosting vitamins.
I love this product. I urge you to try it. Go to drdrew.com/True Niagen for 20% off your order. That is drdrew.com/True Niagen, TRUNIAGEN, and enter Dr. Drew at checkout, DRDREW, enter it at checkout for 20% off. You asked for it, and the wellness company has delivered. The medical emergency kit, replete with ivermectin, prescription antibiotics, and more, continues to fly off the shelves. We keep one here at home. And there are 3 new kits you need to know about, and more are coming. The Contagion Emergency Kit was inspired by the high demand for the medical kits. In that Contagion kit, you'll find ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, budesonide, and a nebulizer. And a must for your next trip is the Travel Emergency Kit, something I made sure exactly what I give my patients is in this kit and some more. The kit includes remedies for jet lag, variety of infections, even GI ailments. Imagine your flight getting grounded anywhere, say even in the U.S., and you start getting sick. You do not want to be at the mercy of the U.S. healthcare system or any healthcare system. At home, we keep the ultimate first aid kit on hand. It has over 20 essential supplies and medications for situations when time is of the essence. Order one for your car and your go bag. Because these kits contain prescriptions, your purchase includes a telemedicine consultation as well as an instruction manual. Go to drdrew.com/TWC for 10% off. That is drdrew.com/TWC for 10% off all your orders. I'm very excited about these kits. Go to drdrew.com/TWC. And we are back. And before we go back to our conversation, Caleb, I'm putting my earpiece in to be able to hear and talk to you. I want to play the video, the one video you have cut of Chris Cuomo talking about his new treatment with horse paste. Can we do that, Caleb?
I am taking a, what do they call it? Like a regular dose, whatever. They're trying to build up of ivermectin. Ivermectin was a boogeyman early on in COVID.
You couldn't talk about it.
That was wrong. We were given bad information about ivermectin. The real question is why?
Bad information.
The entire clinical community knew that ivermectin couldn't hurt you. They knew it, Patrick. I know they knew it. How do I know? Because now I'm doing nothing but talking to these clinicians who at the time were overwhelmed by COVID and they weren't saying anything.
He stares at people.
So there you go. So these guys couldn't hear it, so I want to make sure I had listened to it. So he says, I'm taking ivermectin now, presumably for long COVID, which is something Pierre Corey and Peter McCullough have all reported some benefit for the long COVID patients. And he said, we were given bad information. Really? You were given bad information? How about you listen to people that were giving you good information?
But not just that they were given bad information and they repeated the bad information because they were not critical in their assessment of the information that they were given. Right. Why were they given bad information? Who were they given bad information by? I guarantee you Pharma is behind it and they're culpable.
It's a government agency behind it.
Well, they're all intertwined.
They not only repeated it, they mocked. He mocked with Don Lemon and others, people who were taking it. He called it horse paste. He said, how stupid do you have to be to have done that?
This is that.
Drugs for animals and horse.
And people telling them to. Oh, my God. What person? You talk about cancel culture and who to shame. Ivermectin, a dewormer. Really?
They are shaming themselves. No one has to shame them. They're shaming themselves.
No, they need to be shamed.
Yeah.
They need to be called out and shamed, brother.
I don't know if the mics are working, but when we're watching that, because they are paid pharma. I'm not going to use the word shill, but I'm thinking they're paid pharma promoters. Like when you have Rachel Maddow come out with whatever information she thought she had at the time, saying, "If it's go get shot," go they're paid as spokespeople for pharma. And now he's having a bit of a red pill moment, which I told him in person when I saw him at the Unusual Suspects at Patrick Bet-David's Valuetainment. It's like you're having a red pill moment. But you have to atone for what you're not apologize. And to the people who are affected by it, not me, but you have to apologize because you can't just say, bad information.
Here's again. Oh,
apology,
no, go ahead, keep going.
Of course not.
You uncritically repeated
Here it is.
bad
Let's
information.
go to it.
Apology? Of course not.
He's not going to apologize. So he will eventually, I think.
I don't think he'll apologize because he doesn't have that level of self-insight or integrity. But he knows he was wrong. He knows he's on the wrong side of history. And now he's kind of scrambling because he's got his own hide to be concerned about. So he's now taking the treatment. The reality is, and everybody knows it, we've known for decades that ivermectin has very strong antiviral properties. This isn't something we discovered during the COVID pandemic. It has very strong anti-inflammatory properties. We knew it would be effective. And those of us who, were outspoken about it were decimated, had, threats against our medical license.
Pharmacists wouldn't fill it, though. Those pharmacists should be sanctioned.
Right. He says, and I don't know if they played it in that clip, he says, practicing doctors were overwhelmed with COVID. No, we were overwhelmed with threats. It was not,
so he asked, he says, the medical community knew it couldn't hurt. If they didn't know it couldn't hurt, they really need to examine their fund of knowledge because anyone who's practiced medicine for any period of time has used ivermectin, knows it's a nothing, knows that everybody who comes in here seeking asylum is required to take it by the CDC. Right. Required. And it's a nothing. It's a zero. And the hydroxychloroquine, similarly, it's the only medication I'm aware of that the American College of Physicians recommends you continue during pregnancy. Right. It's so benign.
What did the FDA do with both of those at the beginning?
FDA has nothing to do with anything.
No, but I believe the FDA either withdrew or prohibited.
They did. They lost their suit. That was driven by Paul Merrick and Mary Talley Bowden and a couple others. The FDA had to acknowledge that they were essentially disingenuous and they were dishonest.
I thought there was the CDC that had to do
I might be getting confused between the FDA. No, the FDA is the one that had to remove those tweets.
Forced to take down those tweets. The big one where
you're not a horse.
You're not a horse. You're not a cow. Come on, y'all, stop it. Yeah. That one that was so obnoxious. They had to capitulate.
Yeah.
And that's
did the CDC not prohibit off-label use of ivermectin and HCQ in the early stages?
Yes.
I seem to remember that, and I don't want to...
Do not confuse yourself.
Right.
The CDC and the FDA has absolutely categorically nothing to do with the practice of medicine.
I know that might be true.
Nothing.
That might be true, but I do believe that there were restrictions or warnings given early on, and the underlying theory was that they needed to not have another existing solution to treat it, so they could pass through
the EUA.
I'm pretty sure they issued directives in the beginning, but I don't want to be.
That is a prevailing theory. Now, I don't know that that's true, but you've mentioned that many times, and it is a theory.
There's no question. And the the Federation of State Medical Boards, which has no actual authority, but they've got all the authority in the world. I don't know. We don't even know who the hell they are. They put out a letter to all physicians saying that they are going to support what the FDA and CDC said, and that they would actually sanction and remove people's medical licenses.
I will remind you, these same medical boards said the same thing about the under-prescribing of opiates. Under-prescribing of opiates. That's where the opiate crisis came from regulators and professional societies. Drug companies leaned into it, but it was the regulators that perpetrated
Viva, you're right, because it was because of the stance. The FDA and the CDC, as Drew said, have no actual authority to control what we prescribe. But on their recommendation, the pharmacists, pharmacies, and the American Federation of State Medical Boards adopted that. And they do have authority, and they threatened to take away people's medical licenses and did. Many. I mean, that's what Mary Talley Bowden is fighting that right now in Texas. They want to take her medical license for prescribing ivermectin, which they now have capitulated on. And now, everybody and their brother is taking it and acknowledging that it actually works.
To me, it's the mind-blowing low-risk profile of HCQ and ivermectin compared to the high-risk profile of remdesivir, which I just interviewed Dr. Martinson this morning.
Correct.
So the fatality was upwards of, I don't want to misquote, 20%.
So here's the thing. This is what physicians do. We improvise. We try to repurpose things that are harmless, that we know to be harmless. And when there's evidence in vitro and in vivo that maybe it'll work, we're trying to help and follow our patients. We were told if we did that, we would lose our jobs. Now, I was not, but most 70% of physicians are employees, and they were told that. There's another clip coming here where Cuomo apparently says that he was told by the government to stop talking about vaccines. I want to hear that.
After that clip, I got called by government people bitching at me because I said that the vaccine wasn't perfect. So that's where we were then.
That's amazing. And why isn't he on the warpath about that? Did you hear what he said?
No. He said he got calls from the government telling him to stop talking about it.
To stop saying that the vaccine wasn't perfect. Right. He should be on the warpath.
Well, he might be on someone's target. I mean, Chris Cuomo might have to come out and say he's not feeling, like self-harming because I don't want to use certain terminology flippantly, but that's wild. And it's beyond systemic corruption. This has been captured by Big Pharma. I know you don't go to that angle, but it's captured by Big Pharma. They were all making money off it, hand over fist, advertising. Rachel Maddow's not worth $25 million a year, but she gets paid that to sell that because it makes however many billions Pfizer made in the 2 years.
We are one of two countries in the world that allow pharmaceutical advertising on television. It's the United States and New Zealand. That's it. It is illegal in the rest of the world for a reason, because you do not have honesty in your media when they're bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical industry.
So,
furthermore, they own every one of our, quote, storied medical journals. The Lancet, JAMA, British Medical, they're all bought and paid for by Big Pharma. Those journals are nothing more than the marketing arm for Big Pharma.
The Lancet is the one that came out right in the beginning and said it was racist to suggest it was man-made from a lab in China. Then 18 months later, they say it's always been a perfectly plausible theory. It's
this morning, there were State Department papers that came out that document a lab leak. So I don't know if you saw that this morning.
Well, I just feel stupid for having entertained the idea that it came from eating a pangolin in the beginning. Like, how dumb was I?
No, I've looked at the actual data on an animal pool, a wet market source, and the data is pretty interesting. It's pretty good. You can make the case. It's a complicated landscape, and it just shows how you can take very complicated material and make a story out of it.
But once you look at the genetic code, which we had the third week of February, there was no question.
The cleavage or the
correct. It's the way I put it in lay terms is, and I am not a geneticist, but I do know how to read these studies. And in lay terms, it's when somebody sends you a Word document and they cut and paste something, and but they forget that most of the document was in Calibri, and that one sentence was in Times New Roman, so you can tell that they cut and pasted it. It's like that. You can see the tape marks at both ends of the part that got spliced in.
And you're
it's
talking
like
about the
that.
fur and cleavage.
Yes.
That's the fur and cleavage was in. It exists in coronaviruses, but in only a very small percentage of coronaviruses in that position. Very small.
So you can tell that they cut and spliced a piece of genetic material and plonked it in.
You said only 2 countries on earth, New Zealand and America, that allow for pharma advertising. I immediately think to Canada, where Justin Trudeau, the rage I get when I think of him, he took to the camera and said, "Mom, Dad, I want to talk to your kids." And then he directly targets kids and says, go get the vaccine. And it's like, you don't need to have marketing in Canada when you have the government selling it for the pharma companies. And then they announce a massive building of a Moderna mRNA facility in Montreal.
Canada's leaning further into this. What's going
they've fallen off a cliff.
Happened?
I think the complacency and the security that people feel in relying on governments. They'll
let's talk about in the United States. We have the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, ACOG, which was absolutely pushing, and still to this day is pushing these COVID mRNA vaccines for pregnant women. Okay, despite the overwhelming data that we have on the harms to women and their fetuses.
So you could say that they're a cog in the pharma machine.
Exactly.
Bada bing, bada boom.
So turns out that we now have the receipts. ACOG accepted $11 million in a grant from the NIH in exchange for agreeing to push the vaccines and agreeing to identify their unvaccinated patients so that they could circle back around and try to convince them again the second time around. They agreed to this. They're now up to $17 million. They'd originally accepted $11 million in a grant in exchange for this. It was an absolute quid pro quo. They paid for this. In other words, the ACOG is willing to gamble the fetus and your wife, she's pregnant, to get this thing for some grant money. You can't make this shit up.
I mean, you could, and then you would think it's just as bad as Dr. Mengele experimenting on live humans and what Japan did during World War II. And it's a little more distance. They're not really in there in the room doing it themselves. They're just, it's happening. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way it goes. I mean, their hands aren't dirty. I mean, I don't know how you come back from this. That's the problem.
Well, I think we need to build a chorus of people that are, asking for some sort of accounting of what happened. Back to your point about Rachel Maddow and pharmacy. I used to look at these pharmacy ads for, obscure treatments, expensive treatments for obscure illnesses. And I think, why do they advertise this? How many of this are they actually going to sell? Even though it's expensive. Are they going to, the insurance is determine what the patients get anyway. And patients can demand Ozempic or whatever. But the insurance are going to go, no, you're going to get this one. I didn't understand. And I kept wondering what that was. Well, I've talked to somebody who said the reason they do it is not to sell the product to patients, but to get control over the price.
Absolutely. Or to get good marketing, where you're going to have the Chris Cuomo's now. I don't know if he was supposed to have said that, disclosing that they're basically being bent over by pharma for good advertising. I don't watch Fox News often. That's usually when I'm stuck on a treadmill. It's 4 minutes of advertising. And that's a great way to make sure you buy off Fox so that they don't report negative stuff about the medication.
That's the more subtle point is you don't have to be out there promoting the vaccine or promoting a drug. You simply have to be quiet about reporting anything negative. You don't have to be Rachel Maddow saying, get vaccinated. You got to be that person who doesn't report the study that just showed that we know it causes myocarditis, or that we knew that based on biodistribution studies that it didn't stay in the arm. They don't report. Staying silent is complicity with this whole thing.
There's a number of stories coming out of Canada. I mean, Sean Hartman, whose son died 33 days after the Pfizer shot. Kayla Pollack, who became a quadriplegic after the Moderna booster, after her first 2 Pfizer. The legacy media in Canada doesn't touch it. You Google it, they don't mention a word of it. And I mean, it's no better way of covering up government corruption, pharma corruption, government culpability than just not to report on it.
Right.
And then I won't say the sheep, but the sheep who watch this crap for news say, well, I guess there's no problem, because if there were, I'd be hearing about it.
Correct.
It's capture. It's media capture, government capture, and it all. I mean, I think it doesn't come down to evil as much as it just comes down to money. And those who are weak succumb to money, which makes
me wonder how much money always distorts Republican democracy. I hate to think about it. I'm a big believer in what the founding fathers were thinking about, and the kind of the wonderful, brilliant, balanced system they tried to create. But you see how money adulterates the whole thing.
Well, it's actually, I mean, money might be one manifestation. It's power.
It's power. It's
and so
money keeping power in place.
Yeah, no, well, because it can materialize in other ways where people will do things. There will be equal corruption for sex. There'll be equal corruption for stature, public respect. But money is just the most superficial manifestation of parts. Like, I got money. This is billions of dollars. This is control. These are bargaining chips. And now, by virtue of the amount of money I make, that shows my importance in the world. Or seats on international committees, which I have no doubt Justin Trudeau and some members of government are aspiring to, if and when this World Control Organization gets control over the entire world.
Well, if you look at what's happening simultaneously, because this COVID didn't happen in a vacuum. It's happening at the same time that we've got an assault on our border and on our national, our pride, our nationality, our national identity with open borders. It's happening at the same time that there's an attempt to control everything via the climate side. Okay, it's happening with a war on the farmers. They're attacking the food sources. Just wait. I promise you, avian flu is going to be their excuse to exterminate a bunch of cattle and to kill off a bunch of poultry, birds, so that they're going to put some hurt on the food source. They're simultaneous. They're doing it through the education system with the whole transgender movement. Because each one of these things weakens society, weakens the culture.
If you're an elite, don't you want to be the top of a good big society?
No, you want to be
the one that you control.
You want the one you can control. You want to control these people. Every single one of these spokes on this wheel that I'm talking about weakens society.
I'll quote Tom McDonald when he said he's a hip-hop rapper. He's fantastic. But he says when they separated us from our family...
Tom McDonald does not sound like a hip-hop artist.
Oh, he's amazing.
I'm just saying.
He's in Florida. Tom, if you're here, we could have Tom at the studio. It would be great. But he said the lyrics were, they separate us from our family. They call it social distancing. It's actually something worse. It's called social conditioning. Right. And back in the day, I was so stupid back there. People were saying the mask was not the mark of the beast, but rather a sign of compliance.
100%.
And I was like, oh, maybe not. People are scared. At the beginning, there were probably a great many people who were wearing it either to be polite or out of fear or out of the sincere thought that it did something. Now, you literally see these people protesting on campuses wearing face masks, and not the what is it called? The scarf.
It's not
face masks, N95s. And they're wearing surgical face masks because it is now. What is that?
It's a talisman. It's a sign. It's a symbol. It's a magical symbol that I am a good person.
I went with a more negative connotation. It's more like a hood now, where they say, "Oh, we're part of the same clan, and now I can identify you."
There is that right. It is also an identifying piece.
But it's wild. People have said it in the beginning. Oh, it's a sign of compliance to the government. I was like, you're being a little harsh. And then 4 years later, these people are wearing it outdoors while they're protesting, and it's a sign that we are of the same ideology.
Right.
If they wanted to hide their faces, they could use the scarf. It would be much more efficient and politically appropriate. Right. Now they're showing that they're idiots.
I am a good person, and I'm part of that caring virtue. I'm part of the virtuous. I'm one of the good people here, and I'm with my brethren who are also good people.
Oof.
It's awful.
So one of the things that happened this week also was AstraZeneca got some trouble in court. Okay.
Some bad news.
So the Johnson & Johnson AstraZeneca vaccine was an old-fashioned platform. It was an adenovirus, but it had spike protein. And for some reason, it caused a lot of problems. Early, it was observed, and they were dramatic problems. I got it. I had a reaction. Put up my eyeball there, if you could, Caleb. You'll see Kelly, I want you to look at this.
Yeah,
that was my raccoon eye.
Yeah.
I had a spontaneous black eye, which is the presenting manifestation of a clot in the transverse sinus.
I would immediately have an uncontrollable anxiety attack and think I'm on the verge of death.
I should have. I looked in the mirror and I went,
"Oh, what's that? My face just popped." I mean,
at that point, I thought to myself, "I'm going to be the only male to get this reaction," because thus far I'd only been reported in females. And it didn't progress. These can propagate and progress and result in stroke and all kinds of things, and bleed. So I didn't know whether to take aspirin or not. I think I took a baby aspirin that seemed to hold it. But it was called thrombotic thrombocytopenia. Part of it is thrombotic thrombocytopenia purpura, TTP. And it's a well-known complication of that vaccine. They pulled the vaccines
pulled it in 2021, I think, in the UK, and maybe they stopped it
here too.
That was the first one to go.
Yeah.
And now AstraZeneca, which has been pulled from the market in the UK, and now is, getting the kibosh share.
But they were called out in court for the first time, or was documented.
But can we appreciate this? They told us it was safe and effective based on the trials that they did.
Yes.
And then barely a year into it, had to withdraw it because they actually carried out the trials in real time on real humans and realized it wasn't safe. Every single element of this pandemic conspiracy, because that's what it was, lied to us and experimented on us in real time. And now they want to go back and pretend, well, just trust us. We didn't have good information then when we told you it was safe and effective.
Right. And so they want you, but it's even more preposterous than that. We admit that Janssen was bad. We admit that Novavax was bad.
Trust us, the other ones are good.
But the other ones are still really good. So get your third,
Well, is there a theory here that some people are having that they're going after I thought it was adenovirus. It's adenovirus?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're going after the non-mRNA ones as if to suggest the mRNA ones are still good.
Well,
jack up your bodies with that.
Isn't that interesting?
So this is a conversation we had with our chief medical board over lunch today. That it's my theory, absolutely, that they are making AstraZeneca and Janssen the sacrificial lambs. They're trying to see, we really are serious scientists and we really are serious public health specialists. And when we get bad, this kind of data, we pull them from the market with the idea they are simply trying to leave. It's just coincidence that the ones that are still standing are mRNA.
It's not coincidence. They're the good ones.
Of course. Well, I've said from the beginning that this entire pandemic was the intention, or a big part of this was in order to make mRNA a household word.
It should be for death as well.
They have an absolute obsession with mRNA. It is such a useful platform. It is so potentially lucrative for many, many players, and it allows them to modify so much about you way beyond vaccine delivery. So I think that this was always about mRNA, and I think they specifically teed up Janssen, they teed up AstraZeneca, and then took them down to make it appear that they are being serious about their
serious about pulling it after there are serious real-time results.
I want to dampen, downregulate some of your.
I know where you're going with this. I'll rebut your downgrading in a second.
What I'm going to say is it's very common with pharmaceutical agents that when you do the initial studies, because it's on relatively small populations for relatively short periods of time, it's not
supposed to be with vaccines.
And then they unblind
No. And then when you start using it widely, that's when you start to see the problems. It's always the way it goes. These things that seem totally safe, all of a sudden you go, uh-oh. And that's when you hold. You either hold and take it away, or you hold and restudy. And that's a very common thing. And in the setting of an emergency, I would argue they were taking risks. They knew they were taking risks. I would argue that that's them doing their job. If they'd done that with the other vaccines, I'd be kind of fine with it. But to forge on when kids, 22-year-old with no risk from Omicron, who are getting a 1 in 5,000 risk of myocarditis, that's a conservative, obviously, and pushing it on them, unconscionable now. Right. Now we got a problem.
Somebody on the live feed about half hour ago said they're building AstraZeneca in Canada and advertising it on TV.
AstraZeneca, I'm not sure. Moderna, I know, because they're building a big
AstraZeneca vaccine.
Yeah, they're building a
They may be building a factory, but not a vaccine.
No, but I think if the person might be mistaken, that they're building a Moderna mRNA facility in the place called Laval, which is just on the outskirts of Montreal. It's several $100 million facility.
They're obsessed with mRNA.
Their investment paid off. I mean, they bought off the government, and now they're going to get taxpayer dollars to.
Yeah, Bill Gates just said this past week, for any virus for which we do not have a vaccine, we are going to develop an mRNA.
I was also slow on the Nuremberg 2.0 bandwagon. Yeah. I am thoroughly fair trials, but people need to go to jail for this. I'm not necessarily about the hanging part, because I've turned around a little bit on the death penalty. People need to go to jail for this.
How do you turn around a little bit?
Well, because I used to be a vigorous pro-death penalty proponent, but then you realize how corrupt the government is, so you can't trust them with that power. But people need to go to jail for this.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this from I didn't get injured that I know of. I know plenty of people who did. They told us it was safe and effective when they had no reasonable basis to say that. Then they say, oh, well, we're pulling it now because we're being responsible. I appreciate the emergency situation. But that was, and the sooner Trump comes around on this, the sooner they understand that the Operation Warp Speed was never intended to be a one-size-fits-all for 6 months and up, and Kathy Hochul can go straight to hell for proposing that. That's that. Okay, fine. Rush it. the people who are at risk, take your chances. To mandate it and then to impose COVID, vaccine passports in Quebec.
I agree.
I mean, it's straight to hell.
I agree. Okay, I'm with you on that. The other thing is that as it pertains to mRNA vaccines, I know they have not worked, but if we could use them in cancer, people with very high-risk illnesses with limited life expectancies, those risks are worth it, I would argue, if they actually come up with an effective mRNA platform.
Yeah,
melanoma is the one they keep looking at.
We've been studying mRNA now for well more than a decade. It has failed every single time. There's never been a successsill mRNA vaccine, certainly for anything. Anything. In fact, in some of the studies, all the animals died. I mean, it's been an abject disaster. So the idea that they were not warp speed it.
Am I wrong in understanding? Because I understand where my limitations are, but that the reason why mRNA had failed, or at least the indications for which it had failed, were specifically the flagged the signals that we're seeing now, myocarditis, inflammation.
100%, you're right. No, it failed every other time. Then they said, for some reason, this time it's not going to have those same side effects. Why would you ever think that? And then on top of it, they crossed the most sacrosanct line in the sand, which is that we never give a new drug or therapeutic to a group of people or groups of people on whom it has not been tested. And that included children, people who'd already had COVID.
Pregnant women. Oh my God.
Now we've given it to lots of people. Kelly, come on now.
And then the excess deaths that they're remarking, that has nothing to do with the jab. It has to do with COVID. It has to do with undiagnosed COVID deaths or climate change.
Sorry, I don't mean to do this.
Don't worry, let's hear it.
Brown said she can provide video of selling the AstraZeneca jab in a factory they opened.
Recently, or I know who Maureen Brown is. She's a frequent on my channel as well. Good. I'll look at that on the way home.
So she has the video. I was because it might be Susan. That's what I'm trying to do before you interrupted me.
Hold on, we do hear Susan's
they won't
voice.
Hear her. We do. They won't.
Okay, well then.
Maureen Brown, so a frequent viewer of your show. Thank you, Maureen, for joining us here. That she has the video of Trudeau talking about the AstraZeneca vaccine and the opening.
I knew I was going to be able to look at this camera for a second. Maureen, post it in our vivabarneslaw.locals.com community and I'll have a look, but I'll Google it on the way home. The only question is whether or not it's an old video or new, but I think they're still going through with this Moderna mRNA super facility.
Is Maureen in Canada?
Maureen, are you in Canada? I'm not sure.
If you are, form some sort of vigilante group to get him out of prison when he ends up there tomorrow night.
Make a file in a cake.
We come from a long line of family of lawyers, and we'll be fine. But no, there is no word. They experimented in real time. Obama said it by accident. Right. Well, we've effectively clinically tested on billions of people. Like that's called what was outlawed after World War II.
Exactly. And by the way, Obama says makes that statement, well, we've effectively now tested it on millions of people, and then fails to report. And a whole bunch of them died. Right? Like he doesn't say the next part. Right. You've now used everybody as guinea pigs, and it was an abject failure. You harmed millions of people. We have irrefutable data that that's the case, and they're still out there pushing it.
If anybody hasn't seen that video of Kathy Hochul, she looks like she's being held hostage. 6 months. I know it sounds young, but that's what they say. That's what the liars tell her, and then she goes and repeats it.
Right.
I loathe Kathy Hochul. I didn't think it's possible. Like I've got a hierarchy now: Trudeau, Clinton, Obama, Hochul, Biden.
Which Clinton?
Whitmer. Hillary. I mean, and the funny thing is,
Bill,
I noticed.
Bill
was awesome.
Where's Bill Gates in your list?
Yeah, he's up there also.
Oh my God.
Just channeling his voice.
I feel like Gates he convinced himself and he can't get out of his loop.
No,
Bill Gates reminds me too much of the villain.
He's a sociopath.
There's the villain from Despicable Me, Part 2. He reminds me of that guy, so I'm inclined to like him just because he's funny. But no, it's the sound of the voice. Hochul drives me nuts. Trudeau's just the worst.
Villain.
He's a lovable villain.
So
we need a whole show where we prioritize.
I got more to get into,
list.
But I'm getting a note that you have to go at 4:00. Is that true?
No, I can go. I can go a little longer. Don't worry.
Is anybody have any sense that the fact that there's so much going in the direction of mRNA? And do you know what the blob means?
Oh yeah, the 1970s horror movie.
No. This is Mike Benz's theory that the intelligence community is this blob that's invading everything right now, and it has its own sort of motivations and its own sort of purposes. And he sort of attributes a lot of things that are inexplicable to the behavior of the blob, that the blob is sort of in there doing its thing. And the blob sometimes knows what's good for the population. It's not full of evil people. It's full of people who think they're doing the right thing. Now, evil gets done in the name of good all the time.
All the time.
In fact, that's when social evil does get done. But my question is, might there be a world where the blob is pushing these mRNAs to make sure they get distributed because they are aware of all the biowarfare preparation that's going on out there, and they want us to have something readily available, dangerous as it might be, readily available for something that gets released that is really awful.
Whose theory is this? This is next level, Drew.
My theory.
But why would you go down that route of something as dangerous?
I'm trying to understand.
I know you're trying to make these people good people who are evil. You're trying. I'm sorry, Drew.
I'm trying to make something.
No, how would that even be good? That they're ceding the territory for the consequences of their evil experimentation.
But they back and forth evil, like they're fighting a nuclear war that we don't know about.
I would say that the more likely theory.
What? You like my theory?
That's next level, like 6D conspiracy theory. I think the most obvious one is they will population control, or at the very least migration control. Because now you can take the Western societies that are having civilizational population crises and say, well, you're not growing enough on your own. We're promoting abortion, transgenderism, all basically sterilization or anti-population measures. And so now you need to take in immigrants from various countries, and that's how you get one world government.
If they truly wanted you to protect you, Drew, I hate to break it to you, if they truly wanted to protect, they would do what they did in places like India. They give you a Ziverato, they give you
Covaxin.
They give you a Z-Pack. They give you Ivermectin. They'd make hydroxychloroquine over the counter. They'd give you, prednisone. They would arm you with the things that you need. They'd tell you the truth about vitamin D. Dirt cheap and completely protective against COVID. They'd tell you the truth about these things, but instead they don't want you to know any of that. They want you to believe that their next, $3,000 a shot drug is the thing. Just wait, hide in your basement, bathe in Purell, and hope to hell that we come up with another mRNA shot.
What is it? Oh yeah, So the contagion kit from TWC.health.
Really, because I will tell you, now I'm with the wellness company. If you had taken me back 5 years ago, I would have said I do not agree with giving people a bunch of pharmaceuticals to keep in their house. We don't just randomly give people antibiotics or antivirals just to kind of have around. I have changed my tune after what we lived through in COVID. After I saw what the pharmacists did, the pharmaceutical companies did, the hospitals did, the medical boards did, we have got to arm people because we can, if you have it, the only way they're going to work is if you take them within the first couple of days. If you wait around for weeks, you're done.
But let's put an emphasis on that. Viruses circulate. When they're circulating, they're doing their damage and creating the inflammation, and the inflammatory process that ensues is where you really get into trouble.
And so what we are trying to do, or at least I am, is the opposite of fear mongering. I'm saying don't be fearful. Be prepared. Be ready. We can give you something that contains the top 6 or 8 things so that you can have them. And if we get into a pickle, we get into a bind, great. We have telemedicine. We are available by phone. We have a guidebook in there. We have the way to help you know how to use these. And I've really changed from my stance on this where I was 5 years ago.
Well, I never fully appreciated it until we got locked down. And then you say, well, if we need a nebulizer for asthma, where are we going to get it? And where is it made? And then you find out half of this is made in India or China or countries which are potentially adversarial.
80%.
That was wild. And then for those who are interested in the socialized healthcare system in Canada, I went back over Christmas. I get a sinus infection. I literally can't even find a doctor. I went to what they call a CLSC. It's a clinic.
Urgent care.
And they're like, come back later, call, because we can only see however many people today. And, you need to find a way to get antibiotics so that you don't split your head when you have a sinus infection.
And so,
waiting.
And so that's what we are promoting is the idea that we can arm you with some very safe, very effective, relatively inexpensive medications with telehealth backup. And again, not to make you fearful, but to say, let's be prepared, because what we witnessed was something that was unprecedented in this country. The idea that I would write a script and the patients would call me and say, the pharmacist won't fill it. I mean, that's insane. Illegal. But it didn't stop them from doing it.
Well,
It was
just telling you how to treat your patient
correct,
is insane.
saying
That's
you
just
can't
insane.
do this. So I don't want people to be in that position again, and that's why I was really compelled.
I remember when I would get stupid ass scrutiny from insurance companies, for somebody up in a clerk's office in Chicago would be telling me how to treat a very complex medical psychiatric case, and I would say to myself, this was 25 years ago, I would say, if I don't know what I'm doing, send me back for more training. I love training. It was great. Right. Let's do more training. But you, the clerk sitting in Chicago, you don't know shit and about what's going on here. But if I need more training, that's your determination, or my peers need more training. We are all good at that. We like that. Send us back for more training.
This highlights,
but that wasn't the issue. And that now is we've gone well beyond those days in the last 25 years.
This highlights one of the problems with licensure, and my partner-in-law, there, Robert Barnes, has a big problem with licensure. But locals.com. Licensure should be undone. But I don't know that we'll ever get there. No. But this is the same sort of thing with the practice of law, is once it gets corrupt and once it gets captured, you have those controlling the licensure dictating the conduct of the professionals. And you had lawyers who, in Canada, they were proposing compelling them to have basically like a DEI type, what's the word? Not memorandum, but mission statement. Oh. And if you didn't do it, you'd have problems. They were telling them, sanctioning lawyers for who they represent, what they say in the pursuit of the interests of their client. And that's how you control everything. Mm-hmm. But it's with medical, it's just the next level, because it's literally life and death. And when pharmacies not filling prescriptions, it's not something you could have ever foreseen.
I'm telling you, if the avian flu goes rapidly human to human, somebody's screwed with that virus. Because this is not a human-to-human transmissible virus. And yet they're standing up saying, it's going to happen.
Right, exactly.
It's the only way it's going to happen is if it's been messed with in a biolab.
Right. H5N1 was discovered back in 1995. It is not a new virus. We've had multiple outbreaks over the years since then, somewhere in the range of 880 deaths total from H5N1 in humans, with a relatively high mortality rate, by the way. Full disclosure, about 50% mortality rate. But those people were largely in underserved areas. They were third world countries, had limited access to healthcare, and likely died of bacterial pneumonia on top of the flu and couldn't get antibiotics. All that said, we now have this, their hair on fire. We've got a case in a human in Texas, a guy who was in direct contact with an infected cow.
What happened to him?
He got pink eye.
He got pink eye. That's
he got pink eye. Okay,
you didn't know that?
No, I heard
about that guy.
I've heard about it.
But back to Drew's point. So there's been no human-to-human transmission thus far. That is the nature of avian flu. It does not transmit easily human to human.
When it doesn't cause pink eye, what does it cause? Sniffling and coughing?
No, it can be when
pneumonia.
People die. It causes pneumonia because it's like severe kind of an influenza type picture. But what Drew's pointing out, and I think the important thing to keep, what we are keeping an eye on at the Wellness Company, is if all of a sudden this thing starts to spread human to human like wildfire, that is not a naturally occurring H5N1. And we know that they're doing gain of function on it right here in the United States. University of Wisconsin in Madison is doing it. And we have evidence that at least some of the cattle who have been infected with it are infected with the exact same clade, the variant that they're working on in the lab at the University of Wisconsin.
So
this is a lab leak, is in other words what I'm saying.
And so the blob, the intelligence community, may know about that and be pushing things around, but rather there's a lot of you can't handle the truth in the pandemic. It felt like they were constantly saying, you can't handle the truth. You can't handle the truth. That it was, I want to remind everybody that in the movie, A Few Good Men, Jack Nicholson utters that line, screams that line. He was the villain. He was the villain. He was to show somebody who was saying something outrageously villainous and saying that. And yet I felt like that's how we were all treated during COVID.
We might not be able to handle the truth because it might destabilize the very core foundation of what we thought was a civilized society. The government is evil. Pharma is evil. They're testing on us.
Dislodge an elite and put somebody in.
No, like imagine you find out they've been lying to you and experimenting on you. But we know this. They experimented on people during the Tuskegee experiments. They experimented on kids in the residential schools. Tuskegee. I mispronounced that. In our residential schools, they were testing on indigenous kids. Yep. I mean, they've been doing it forever. Why wouldn't they be doing it now? Like they've learned their lessons.
This is why there will never be the kind of accountability that you would like to see in your soul.
Well, I believe Justin Trudeau just apologized for the residential school crisis, which his father was partly responsible for as well.
The Nuremberg or whatever you want, the actual accountability will never happen, I believe, because it would be so destabilizing to understand if people really understood just how deep the corruption went.
You have a French Revolution.
This is the kind of stuff that civil wars are made of, that revolutions are made of. It would destabilize this country in a way that I don't think they will ever let it happen. We may get lucky enough that we have a few sacrificial lambs. We might get a Fauci or a Walensky or a Bright or Barrack or Daszak or one of those top names to fry for this. But I don't think it's going to go much more than that. You get this abdication by the FDA about ivermectin or this tacit admission that they lied about X, Y, or Z, but you'll never get the full truth.
You imagine you get Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, two of the top 3 biggest criminal fines ever imposed on a pharma company. They're the ones to trust and just shut your eyes and stick it in your arm. That was barely 15 years ago that they had those penalties. It's memory is short, and people don't want to see the truth.
Right. I think it's very, very scary to people. And so, we are looking and saying, how do you reestablish confidence in the healthcare system? How do you get people to ever listen to anything public health specialists have to say again? Because the next thing's coming. I don't know if it's disease X or avian flu or whatever it's going to be, but the next big thing is coming. And God help us when we try to get the public, just in this country or, globally, to listen to anything we have to say, because this was screwed up. The COVID response will go down as the biggest disaster, the biggest failure of public health in recorded history.
Will it? That's the problem.
I think it will, and this is why,
you think it's going to get it may get worse, but this is, I think. Well,
the fact that they're going for a World Health Organization treaty and pushing further in that direction.
Right. Well, I think that
history will be written by the victors.
But that's the proportionate over response. I think. I mean, there will be, and I do hope for this, like a WikiLeaks type disclosure of internal emails and internal documents.
Of what?
Of Pfizer trials, of internal emails, correspondence, text messages. I'm not encouraging anybody to do it, but I'll read it with glee when it comes, because we know what they did, and one day, God willing, the truth will come out. But it will go down as the biggest debacle in history. It'll just take 50 years, maybe. I hope to live long enough to see it, but I'm already 45, so.
No, it is coming out. We are getting drips and drabs. We're getting bits of the puzzle where each day we get one more piece. We had from the very beginning, for example, the Pfizer biodistribution study that showed clearly that they knew they were lying through their teeth when they told you that shot stayed in your arm. They knew damn well that wasn't true. We have their study that was pre-market before they rolled them out, showing that they knew that mRNA, that lipid nanoparticle, went to almost every major organ system within a matter of hours.
By the way, when I had the AstraZeneca shot, I had a very bizarre, violent chill. It was not like a rigor. It was very strange. I felt it from my top of my head to my toes.
And people report, I'm not vaccinated, but we have lots of people who reported that. Pfizer knew before, think about this, pre-market, that 11% of that mRNA ended up in the reproductive organs, specifically the testes and
ovaries. They push it on kids.
And instead they said, it stays in your arm. That is still on, it is still on the CDC's website that the mRNA will be eliminated for your body, we quote, within a matter of days. They knew it lasted at least 6 months, because that's as long as they tested it. They knew it lasted 180 days. I say it over and over again. These were not mistakes my government made. These were lies my government told me, and there's a difference.
Susan, anything else on the retweets, on the restream, on the Rumble rants?
We love Kelly.
Yes, of course they do.
TWC.com. TWC.health/Viva. I'm just going to hijack the promo code.
We have put Tamiflu in the Contagion kits because there's shown some utility against avian flu early. Not a great medicine. Some utility in influenza. Not a great medicine, but it's something is the point. There are things you can do to help yourself.
When the next big thing comes, I've got a fishing rod, and I'm not against eating iguana, and Florida's got a lot of them, so we'll do fine.
Right, exactly.
Iguana jerky.
I've seen you. I know that you throw an iguana on there.
But I do think that people need to think. I'm not talking about stockpiling baked beans and toilet paper. I'm saying you need to be prepared with some basic stuff, because they've shown their hand. They've showed their cards. And, I said the other day when we're talking about, disease X or avian flu, I said, look, folks, I'm not reading the tea leaves. I'm reading the billboard. Yeah. They've been telling us what they're going to do. They're saying the next thing's coming. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to know they are about to launch something else. And it behooves everybody to at least have thought about it.
We are saying two things here today. One is either it is some sort of concerted effort for destabilizing and retaining control and maintaining an elite, sort of ensconced elite, versus a blob, an intelligence community that's pushing things around in ways that we don't really understand.
Yeah, no, sorry.
I'm not going with the blob.
The blob can either be motivated in our benefit or
I think
for ill.
It's the blob. It's the blob and tentacles that wants to encompass the entire earth and all who dwell within.
That type of blob,
like
a conspiracy. Exactly. I'm sorry.
that was. I got hard evidence for that one.
There's all I can tell you is that there's not one bit of this that involves altruism. Any sort of beneficence. Those do not play into this entire thing.
If you hadn't been so right about almost everything, I would push back on that.
No, trust
Kelly
me.
has been so spot on with things that even when I was like, I'm not sure. Yeah,
I'm just wait a month.
Kelly's right again.
Well, I did notice a chat came up that said no one said depopulation would be easy.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what is your link for the wellness company?
Viva's link for the wellness.
My link is twc.health/Viva.
VIVA.
VIVA. It's on my shoe. I realized, by the way, let's see, next time I'm going to fold my legs.
Hawk your t-shirts too.
I got these shirts at Viva Fry and then these shoes, which are actually custom made by Murph's Kicks. Check that out.
Is fantastic.
He sends me a bunch of this stuff every now and again. But twc.health/Viva for my the wellness company.
There you go.
All right, that about wraps us up. Thank you for coming all the way down here.
Thank you for getting me out of the house. I listened to a podcast on the way down, and I'll listen to one on the way up. So it's valuable.
Did we recommend one for you to listen to? I thought we were saying something.
You did Confessions.
Augustine Confessions.
Augustine Confessions. Good luck with that. That's the first 100 pages is really where the autobiography goes. And they get a little philosophical after that. But that's where the big book is, where he's talking about his mom and her drinking, and she struggled. And she was
how long ago is this?
500 AD or something?
I don't think it's that
800 AD?
Oh, I thought it was,
St. Augustine of Hippo.
Right.
So help Susan.
I think it's later than that.
Because there's a St. Augustine in Florida, which is not named after.
Everything St. Augustine is St. Augustine.
Yeah, but it's later than that.
His mom was, I believe, St. Monica. Santa Monica.
Oh,
Monica.
That might be. I don't know that one.
Well, Monica
I think
was
St. Augustine's way
Monica
later.
was his inspiration in a lot of ways. And she was from a different sect. What was that called? It was the sort of a good, bad, sort of almost Zoroastrian kind of thing. Shoot. Anyway, but he found Christianity.
Okay.
That was his answer.
I think on the way back, I might have to catch back up on the Trump trials and whatever the latest developments are.
You've been going crazy on that.
Tomorrow, I mean, there's people who are live tweeting the New York Alvin Bragg case because it's not being streamed. So there's a guy named Inner City Press, Matthew Russell Lee. I don't know how the dude does it, but tweets everything as it happens.
Oh.
So like a bunch of, like I say, we're all addicted to Twitter. We're sitting there, refresh. I need to know what just happened.
Yeah.
We're sitting there like refresh so we can see what the next thing that happens in court is.
What is it again? What's his name?
Inner City Press.
Inner City Press.
At Inner City Press on Twitter. Matthew Russell Lee. He's amazing. And he covers all of the stuff that's at the federal courthouse.
Stormy Daniels was testifying yesterday.
Yes, it didn't go well for Stormy.
And she was asked specifically if she hated Trump, and she said yes.
Of course.
And
she owes him $500,000.
And did she want him to go to jail? And she said
absolutely.
Yes. And then they said, now does this have anything to do with the fact that you owe him $500,000?
But I'll tell you what, here's what they didn't ask that I thought they should have asked. You liked him enough to sleep with him. Why do you hate him now?
Oh no, because she said that she felt pressured into sleeping with him. It's so flipping dirty what they're doing. Because she used the word
trying to just humiliate him.
Absolutely.
And then his wife will kill him.
She said, I spent the entire time looking at the ceiling and wishing I was somewhere else. If we believe that this happened. And then she says, I felt drugged. And then there's a huge objection. And they have a sidebar. If you weren't actually drugged, were you? This is what the prosecution has to ask her. No, but there was a power imbalance. My joke of the day was that she gagged on her lies with the double entendre. But it's just a public humiliation so they can...
Yes.
So it starts up again tomorrow. The Wednesdays are always off, and then trial is back on tomorrow.
And she's stealing Queen Victoria's line. I lay there, stare at the ceiling, and think of England.
But they've not done any criminal presentations. There's nothing, no witnesses to a
No,
this
this
is totally unrelated.
The
criminal is not what he did now with her. It's how they
disguised the payment for what he allegedly did with her. But
why are they getting into her stuff?
They objected to her even being a witness.
The judge allow it?
Because the judge, Juan Marchand, his daughter, is working at a PR firm or is an executive at a PR firm called Authentic. She's raising millions and millions of dollars for Adam Schiff as one of her clients.
Right. Oh,
it's total corruption. This judge has animosity of the highest order for Trump. And back in 2019,
what's wrong with your profession?
Psychopaths are attracted to law. There's no question about it. I mean, that's why the nice, good lawyers have to leave. I mean, I can't spend my life surrounded by psychopaths. So I ended up,
But if he does stay in law, we know what he suffers from.
90% of lawyers give the other 10% a bad reputation. Bada bing, bada boom.
Okay. Well, we will leave it at that. I thank you all for being here. Kelly, great to see you here.
Thank
I'm so glad you joined us in person.
This was great. Really fun.
Likewise.
Drew, thank you. Nice to meet you in person. I've seen you online.
We've been
we'll
on
have a barbecue
Zoom.
at his house one of these days.
Yeah. All my Zoom acquaintances and Zoom friends and colleagues. Showed up in Florida. Exactly.
Yeah, we're gonna just podcast out of this studio and just move nearby, and
there you
we'll
go.
have our friends
there you
here.
Go. We won't have to
live in a thriving
and get rid of the whole
it's
Zoom
beautiful.
thing.
The only problem with the area is traffic, but it's beautiful, good sandwiches.
Yeah, I will say BS on the traffic thing. We spend most of our time in New York and Los Angeles. This is
that's new for you, but it's not traffic. That it's worse somewhere else doesn't mean it's not bad here.
There
but
you go.
It's not bad here by comparison with places that have
good luck in Canada. We'll be,
you'll see me live.
We'll be thinking of you. And
where do we watch this?
It's going to be streamed somewhere. I think I'm going to stream a portion of it on my channel, but it's going to be on Rebel News and live the whole day. So there's going to be, everyone has a 30-minute slot where we're going to talk and maybe just go on a 30-minute rant. Then there's going to be a live Q&A afterwards. Then there's
I'm going up to BC and doing something similar. And there's a great Émile Zola quote: "La vérité est en marche."
The truth is in motion. It was your accent that threw me off a little bit.
En marche.
Est en marche.
La vérité est en marche.
C'est
vrai.
C'est vrai. I mean, we're getting there. I think people's eyes. I mean, there's been a great awakening. Yes. I haven't yet read. It was Alex Jones's new book is called The Great Awakening. I have to listen to it, but there's a great awakening and we're in the midst of it. So little white pill.
There you go.
Leave it at that. White pills. We ended with a white pill yesterday. We're going to end with a white pill today. We'll see you all. Let's put the schedule up there, Caleb, if you don't mind. And after that, we got to do a little My Pillow, I think, too. Paul Alexander, Joseph Ladapo, your Surgeon General, is a great guy. Aaron Cariotti, who is before the Supreme Court now in the Biden versus Missouri case. That he's the psychiatrist that was fired needlessly. Tulsi Gabbard may be a vice presidential candidate. Who knows? We'll let you know about 21st, 22nd. So do come back for us there. That'll be 14th. I think it's Tuesday at 3:00. And then I want to remind people, our friends, I interviewed Mike Lindell the other day and he made us an affiliate. And so I willing to talk about his stuff. And we pushed out we have a code, I think, for Mike. He's got towels and everything. mypillow.com/Dr. Drew. We bought a bunch of beach towels, bath towels. What else we got? Socks, underwear. They have all kinds of stuff. It's kind of extraordinary what he's doing there. mypillow.com. And by the way, /Dr. Drew. It's all in the outskirts of Minnesota somewhere. And the nicest people in the world work there. When you call them and talk to them, they're just so grateful to have you be a part of their community.
What is it?
MyStore.com.
They're a cool company.
But it's cool. I think this world of people supporting one, it almost feels like, I don't know, little towns that would support each other's businesses and things. Like people want to support each other's operations.
Well, Mike has a great story. I mean, he told
the whole story on the show. Susan's in here. She wants to say hi. Here she is.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we appreciate it very much. And we'll see you next week, 3:00 Pacific time, Tuesday. See you then. There are 4 distinct and outstanding medical kits from the Wellness Company: a first aid kit, a travel emergency kit. I was very instrumental in developing that one. I love it. A COVID emergency kit. But let's unpack their medical emergency kit, the one that gives you immediate access to treatment for a variety of medical conditions. Here's the kit: pneumonia, upper respiratory infections, skin infections, gastrointestinal infections. You'll have on-hand medication that will even serve as immediate prophylaxis against a sexually transmitted infection, rapid intervention for Lyme and other tick-borne illnesses. Of course, we've added Tamiflu to our kits. In case the avian flu should become human-to-human transmissible, then we know something is up and we want to be ready. And look, we want to be covered for bioterrorism even. And of course, the Nobel Prize-winning antiparasitic Ivermectin, and a how-to guide and a virtual consultant. Get access to these prescription meds by going to drdrew.com/TWC to save 15% off. That is $30 off the medical emergency kit. drdrew.com/TWC for 15% off the kit and any of their kits or their supplements. Do it now. drdrew.com/TWC. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.